Just because you see a breast cancer ribbon on there doesn't mean anything. I mean, they could be giving 50 cents to the cause and could still contain carcinogens within the product. And I wrote about that recently, a few months ago, and someone wrote in asking me about whether they should buy pink paint products. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of pink products out there that are actually putting more carcinogens into our system, and to me it should be like an automatic no. If you want to carry the pink ribbon, you should be pre-screened to make sure that there are no hormone disruptors, there are no suspected thyroid disruptors, there are no carcinogens, none of this stuff. Unfortunately, that isn't the case, so that is not one of the symbols that I would suggest.
Sorry,
yeah.
Does your book list what is a hormone disruptor?
Yeah. I will talk more about hormone disruptors too. I mean, hormone disruptors, basically, they're also known as endocrine disruptors. And our endocrine system essentially tells our 10 trillion cells how to develop and whether to, how to reproduce, how to grow, and they're essential to so many elements of our lives. And so when we talk about hormone disrupting chemicals, it could disrupt in different ways, by mimicking an estrogen, by blocking it, by interfering with various hormones. And so it's all over the place, and there are so many chemicals that fall into this camp. And something that I will get into, but I won't just get into it now. The whole thing with the UN just last week, a week and a half ago now, came out with a report saying, look, global leaders, we need to get our act together on the hormone disruptor front. This is serious. We are messing with nature right now. And it was the World Health Organization and the UN, and they came out and said there are way too many hormone disrupting chemicals in the world, playing with human health and with wildlife's health. And we need to start worrying about this. We need to take this seriously. And they're talking about it's linked to these chemicals, hormone disrupting chemicals, linked to infertility, early periods, elevated breast cancer, elevated prostate cancer, obesity, etc. The list goes on. And so to me, I was so happy to see that a global body came out and said, let's take this seriously. Because a lot of times when I go around and talk about this stuff, people are like, yeah, well, how does it mess with our hormones? And how serious can it be? Well, the truth is that we're taking it in from all these different sources in our lives. And we are exposed all over the place, not just from one product, but there's on average 12 products women use every day, 8 for men, so it's about 100 chemicals on average that we're exposed to. Not all of them are hormone disruptors, not all chemicals are bad. Absolutely not. Many are perfectly safe. But right now, the way the system is you have to be your own chemist. When you're out shopping, you've got to sit down and figure out, okay, do I have a chemistry degree? Is this a good one? Is this a bad one? I don't know anymore. And it's too much. The responsibility should not fall on us. Because, ultimately at this point, we are all polluted. We are all, each of us in this room, polluted. And the problem is, it would be one thing if, I chose these products over the course of my life, and so it's my fault. But I mean, a newborn baby is born now, and in an umbilical cord, they have found up to 350 synthetic man-made chemicals, from flame retardants, stain proofers, shadow proofers, smudge proofers, the list goes on. And they're in newborn baby umbilical cords, they're in wildlife, from dolphins to whales and eagles, etc. They're in all this. And so I was really curious to know what chemicals were also inside me. And I decided to get a little bit of testing done. And I actually got an email from the Naturopath Association in Canada. We're just sending out a press release saying, oh, we've got some new access to new testing available. We don't just do heavy metals now. You can also get tested for various pollutants like parabens, etc. I said, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to sign up for this. And it's not something you necessarily all want to run out and do at all. They don't recommend it. They're basically saying if you have major health problems that aren't being addressed, you might consider this as an option. But what I did was have 3 big pieces of my hair cut out for the heavy metals test, heat on stick, and I sent it in and waited. And I remember my editor said, oh, this could be interesting. You could make a story out of this. I don't think there's going to be much of a story. I look pretty green. for a long time. And she was like, well, no, there's something. I'm like, nah, don't worry about it. Then 3 weeks later, my results came in. And I was totally floored. I mean, I know we're all polluted. I know we all have stuff in us. But when you see it in yourself, when you see what's in there, your jaw just hits the ground. You know, holy. And I remember first the urine results came in, and he said, okay, well, you have normal levels of styrene, which is basically styrofoam. And I said, what? What's wrong with that? Like, yeah, so don't worry about them. They're normal levels of styrene. Yes, styrene is a carcinogen, but it's very normal for North Americans. I said, I had literally before the test, I remember saying I was going to do a little bit of. Do you not hear the book Slow Death by Rubber Duck? He does, my friend Rick Smith exposes himself to all kinds of toxins, gets his blood tested, and sees how many of them are in him. This is my little version of doing it, and I was like, you know, what if I get Chinese takeout in a styrofoam container the night before? Is it going to show up? Sure enough, the styrene was in there. But, you know, there are good things. I was low in phthalates. Phthalates are the family of hormone disruptors that have been banned from children's toys in Canada. And banned from pretty much all consumer items in Denmark, but they're normally found in scented items as well as vinyl stuff. And I was very low in that. I thought, okay, well, that's good. You can't prevent everything, you know, from washing your hands in public with soap that has synthetic scents, that kind of thing. I had, well, the list kind of went on with the kinds of things that were in me, but my biggest shock came when the hair results came in. And my mercury levels were up here, and my lead levels were up here, and I was completely baffled. I was sitting there trying to trace it back, at least with the other things I could say, oh yeah, okay, there was this, and I watched my gut there, and I could control where it was coming in from. And then with the mercury and lead, I thought, where the hell is this coming from? And as a good journalist, the first thing I did was call my mother. So, what do you think? Did we have lead pipes growing up? Like, she goes, no, we always filtered our water. So what do you think happened? She paused and she said, well, Shawinigan? I said, yeah, okay, maybe Shawinigan. You know, Shawinigan is a big industrial town. And, you know, right in the heart of town there was an aluminum refinery, which in the 80s would have emitted mercury. There was a pulp and paper mill not too far from our house. In the 80s would have emitted mercury. There was a paint company in town, right near my school, probably a kilometer or two away, which up until the 80s would have been using lead, especially for exterior paint. Interior paint stopped using lead in the 60s. But then I thought, okay, all right. So these are the toxins that we probably all have, my brothers and sisters, my parents. We probably all have this stuff in us that we really, for the most part, can't control. You know, the medical director of the clinic that does the testing for doctors and naturopaths across Canada, I spoke to him and he said, well, you know, your lead, your mercury, that's pretty much in you for life. So then I was thinking, okay, these are the toxins I cannot control. I cannot control where I grew up. I can't control the air that I breathe today. I can't control, we all have toxins that we can't control in our own history. But what are the toxins we can control? What can we actually reduce in our lives? And the truth is it's this stuff. This is the stuff that we can get out of our lives today. This is the only stuff that we have total control over without having to harass our politicians about, without having to change federal laws, without getting a whole neighborhood on board. We can at least get this stuff out of our systems and start reducing our overall body burden. And I know, you know, people come to me and say, well, these are trace levels, how bad can they be? But honestly, we are exposed through so many sources, and we already have a myriad of chemicals in us. I really don't want to add any more to the mix. And people will say, well, you know, I mean, like, doesn't mean that we're going to die from it. So yeah, that's true. I'm not sitting there being an alarmist saying, you know, this is going to kill you. No. But the cumulative exposure adds to our body burden, which, you know, when headlines started coming out in the United States last week saying breast cancer rates on the rise amongst young women, fatal breast cancers on the rise amongst young women, reports saying we need to look at the environmental causes of breast cancer. These are things that we need to start paying attention to. The UN saying we need to be paying attention to the hormone structures we use every day. They named phthalates, which are in the scented products, and they named other chemicals